Welcome, everybody. Hello. Okay, awesome. Let's get started. We'll call this meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, I will open the floor for public participation. Seeing none, we will proceed. The first item on our agenda is to approve the meeting minutes from the 10:15 meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the minutes as drafted? Okay. Do you need me to speak the number of people who voted either way? Okay. So we had 10 in favor, 1 abstain, and 2 absent. All right. The first business before the committee is unfinished business from our 10:15 meeting. The first item to review is discussion of the budget committee meeting location. We had an opportunity to view the setup of the Matthew Thornton room last week and hear from representatives of Merrimack TV as to the pros and cons of using that space. I'd like to open the floor to committee members to share your thoughts and concerns. No, we'll open it up for discussion and then we'll vote. Marie?
I very much like the room. I've been there several times for school board meetings, and I thought if they set it up with the desks angled a bit to make it sort of a U shape with extended arms, so that everyone is kind of facing everyone, but nobody has their back to any public that would be in the benches. So with that amending of their proposal, I would be very much in favor of moving to that room.
Any other comments? Gina?
I apologize, I was not able to go to any of them. The only question I had is, I thought someone brought up last time that we couldn't perhaps use it consistently every Tuesday. Has that been resolved? Because that would be my only concern.
We have put together a draft calendar for the season for our meetings, and as far as I know, we have one meeting where there may be a conflict. Is that right, Pat?
No, actually, that's not right.
Okay.
We don't know whether the room will be available in January and February until what dates we're I have called and asked and talked to them. Paul Mulcahy told me that they will try to work it out, but the planning board does meet twice a month on Tuesdays.
Okay.
And I haven't heard back when I give them all the dates. I've called and shared the dates with them, but I was waiting for this vote before I can say yes or no.
Okay.
Then becomes the problem if we can't have all the meetings, then what? Do we switch back and forth, or do we stay here?
Okay, so it's unconfirmed. We've shared our draft meeting calendar with the other committees that utilize that room. We were hoping that it would be logistically available for us, but we haven't gotten confirmation yet. So we will, I guess, weigh that into our plan, and we can always have a preference for the board and then a plan B. Okay. Any other comments, Brian?
I thought he did say that there was only that one conflict as well, and I think he said with the planning committee that he could ask them and they would probably be willing to use the other room. So again,
Actually, the problem is that Nick doesn't have control over that room. The town manager does. And that's Paul Mulcahy, and I have talked with him.
okay.
So it's a question of what this committee wants to do. But the planning board meets twice a month.
Okay.
And
Okay.
they meet on Tuesdays, and they've been there for years. And Paul, when I talked with him, seems that it's okay, but he didn't say yes.
Okay.
So that's what I need something from you all, and then I'll talk with him.
All right. Just in addition, it did change my mind going there to see it. We did the quick vote, and it was kind of just not thinking. Just thinking of the school board meetings in there can sometimes get full, but seeing the setup the way he had it and actually sitting in the chairs and looking at it, it was definitely much more. It was different than I was expecting. So I would be in favor if everything works out too.
Shannon?
Couple of things that were definite positive. I love the U-shape. I love that it's live, so people can follow us online, and that it gets posted right away. It is handicap accessible, which is great. They do have a phone, so people can call in, which I thought was wonderful. And it does definitely, with the U-shape, good sight views. I've sat around the whole table. I loved it. And then you have a computer in front of you, so if there's something presenting in front of you, it's right there. The only few negative things that I saw was if we have, we know that we're going to have a large public opinion about a topic. I don't think that room is going to be able to be moved here, but he was very open to being able to switch it back here if we had to. We would just need to let him know. And then the other thing that I did not like is because we, in our last meeting, talked about Zoom capability, he did talk about if there is sports, we wouldn't be able to have Zoom. Say if someone called in, we wouldn't be able to have that. But he would need to know that up front too.
And I think the preference was to do phone calls for people who are calling in rather
Correct.
than Zoom anyway. So
Yep.
that would be a once in a while kind
Right,
of situation.
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Gina?
So what happens if we do vote yes, but then it comes back, it can't be consistent? I mean, can we vote again to have it back here? Because I don't think that's going to work, having two different places. So that's my only concern with the vote. I have no problem moving it over there, but if it can't be consistent, then we have to have a plan B.
So your preference would be based on wherever we can have the most consistent location.
I mean,
Is that-
we struggle with public participation as it is. To move it back and forth, I think, is just not conducive to encouraging public participation. It's a little confusing, I think.
Okay.
Comment, I guess, piggyback on that logic. Were there a significant turnout of public participation day of? We wouldn't have the option of coming over here day of. So you kind of can't pre-plan for when everybody's going to show up.
I will add, too, that I think the room is, if I recall, rated for 80 people. So thus far, I haven't seen 80 people show up at our meetings yet, but perhaps that will occur this season. So I do think that I attended one of the school board meetings last year where there was standing room only in the back, and it was okay. I don't see it as a blocker. Okay. Any final comments? Okay, so I think what we can do, we don't have to do like a full roll call vote. We can just take a consensus of the committee. So I would like to have a motion on the table about our preference as a committee, and then we can have a secondary option that we also have consensus on. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we say that our meetings are going to be at the Matthew Thornton Room unless otherwise noted, and then we could consider having it here. Does that work?
So the motion on the table is that we vote by consensus whether we want to plan to have our meetings at the Matthew Thornton Room, unless otherwise noted. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second. Because it's all going to come back whether Pat is able to, if they, 'cause now she knows if people are willing to move forward, she can tell them we're willing to move forward, and maybe they'll come back and say there is one conflict, or and we can kind of make a more educated decision, I guess.
Okay. So it sounds to me like a yes vote on this motion would be that you agree that you would like to move forward with planning to have our meetings there if the schedule works out, and that we can always change that decision at a later date, or we can build into our motion that if that location does not work, we would plan to meet here for the remainder of the season. So what do you guys think? Okay. So the motion on the table is to plan to have our meetings at the Matthew Thornton Room unless otherwise noted. And if it's not able to happen logistically, we will revert to having our meetings here. Can I, Gina, do you have a
Revert to
question?
having all of our meetings here, or just the meetings that there's a conflict? Sorry, I'm just want to be clear.
We will revert to having all of our
Okay.
meetings here
Okay.
if we cannot have our meetings at the Matthew Thornton Room. Yep. That's not to say that if the schedule works out that we can have 7 out of 8 meetings there, we can always make a change because we have, unless otherwise noted, in the motion. So, okay. Yep, Rachel?
Sorry, I don't know if we wanted to simplify it and just have the motion be, we either vote to move forward to hold our meetings there. If Pat finds out something different, we can always re-motion next meeting to change that. And then it's just a little less complicated, I think. I don't know.
I can tell you that the Matthew Thornton Room is open on the date that you're scheduled for your December meeting. So if we want to go there, and then by then I'll also be able to figure out their calendar.
So we have a motion on the table. Rachel, were you asking to amend the motion?
Yes, if I'm allowed to amend it, I would amend it.
Okay.
To say what?
To say that we move forward with planning our meetings to be at the Matthew Thornton's room. Period. If that needs to change, we could make another motion at our next meeting.
Okay.
So if we decide affirmatively on this motion, our next meeting, we would not have time to revert the motion before our next meeting. So we would have to have it there, I think.
The way I'm understanding Rachel's motion, which I agree with her amendment, is that we would go forward with the plan to have it in the Matthew Thornton Room And our next meeting would be at the Matthew Thornton Room. Pat will let us know, and if there's a problem, we address it at that meeting.
That's how I understand it as well.
Yes.
Okay, then let us call for a vote. Everyone all in favor of the motion on the table, please raise your hand. Oh, Gina's thankfully seconding the amendment. All right. All in favor of the motion on the table? Ten in favor, 1 abstain, 2 absent. Okay, the next order of old business is to revisit the liaison team decision or proposal. At our last meeting, a proposal was made by school administrators to eliminate the liaison team meetings and instead gain insight into the needs of each district department through a global consolidated budget recommendation put forth by the administration. We tabled a decision on this at the last meeting, so at this time I'd like to open up to the committee for thoughts or concerns if you'd like to debate this proposal. Otherwise, we can move to a motion. Gina?
So I just have a quick question, and I forgot if you answered this before. Was there any feedback from the administrators that they did not want to have the liaison meetings? I want to be respectful of their time, so it, it matters obviously what we say, but they're the ones that are taking time out as well, so I just.
Very good timing on your question, seeing that the person I was looking for to answer that question has just shown up. So, Bill.
Good evening, everyone. There was no negative comments about the liaisons. They just like the idea of having us present sort of a consolidated budget presentation so that we sort of look at everything from a global perspective. And then they are certainly available to come and answer your questions. They would be available to come and answer your questions so that none of them expressed any negative comments, but they liked the idea of the central administration making that presentation, Gina, and then them being available for questions.
Could I just clarify what you're saying, that they would be in the room when you're doing the presentation so that we could ask them questions?
Marie, what my idea would be is we make that global presentation. You have a short period of time to develop questions in writing. We're going to ask the school board to develop the questions in writing also. We have a template for that, and that they would be here at the follow-up meeting or meetings to answer any of your questions.
So what you're saying is, last year when everybody came up separately to present their own, we wouldn't do that. It would just be you presenting on their behalf. Okay.
That's right, because I think it's a more organized approach to giving you a picture of where we are and what we're requesting.
Dan?
Yeah, I remain vehemently opposed to this for the reasons that I said last time, but I'll state them again. In the liaison teams, we go in and meet with these people. They have no expectations of what the questions are, what the answers will be. And sometimes you get, oh, I didn't think of that. The other thing is, I think it's preposterous to think that these leaders are going to come in and sit in front of their bosses on something that is televised to the entire community and answer everything on the level. They're only going to be there. You're never going to get down here. You're never going to find out what might really be bothering them. And I've asked them, what if you had an open book, what would you go for here? What are we missing? What are you asking for that you know you're not going to get? You know, I'm not sure we're going to get that type of digging down in with this thing. The other thing is, I think it is clearly a move to remove any responsibility from this committee. If your only approach is to question these people at a public meeting that is on TV for everybody to see, you're not going to get the same thing you're going to get from them if you go into their office and sit there for 1 or 2 hours and ask them whatever question you might have. So I think there's a removal of some of our responsibility, but I think there's a firm removal of the answers that you will get to questions. And that's my input.
May I respond to that? I
Yes,
certainly
please.
respect, Dan, I certainly respect your opinion. The one thing I do want to say is we have a trusting, respectful relationship among all of our leaders in the school department. They are free to express themselves with no fear of any repercussions. There are no right or wrong answers. There are answers and factual answers, and that's the way I view it. And so that, you know, I'm not looking at it, Dan, as from a perspective of, you know, they're going to be nervous answering questions in front of us. There should be no nervousness of them because we have an open book, and that's the way we conduct our leadership team meetings, and that's the type of relationship we have.
Thank you, Bill. Lee?
Thank you, Dan. As I stated previously, that leaves a large question for us here on the Budget Committee as to how we divide and conquer the rest of this budget. In previous years, we divide and conquer by doing these teams that liaise with each individual group. And this isn't a question for you guys, this is a question for us here on the committee. How are we going to divide that? None of us should be responsible to understand the whole budget in its entirety. It's much too large for that. I think that's one of the reasons why this was put in place originally. Obviously, I don't have any historic knowledge to that effect, but I would assume that there was a divide and conquer mentality to working as a team to divide the budget and dig down into each individual piece and have that understanding brought to the committee by other committee members so that no one person or it's just too large of a thing for us to absorb all individually. So if we make this motion to accept Bill and move on, we then have to figure out on our side how to manage this process internally.
Shannon?
I appreciate your candor when you talk about your trusting in relationship and free to express themselves. I'm glad to hear that from our perspective. I remember sitting here last year, and there was a vote for a new individual to come on to come on with this team. Not everybody was here, and I shared with them that I was a paraeducator for 7 years, and I will let you know that. During that time, they were like, it would be great to get your perspective on how people feel that their voices are being heard in the school districts. Yes, I do believe there is a great relationship between admin and the teachers, but there is still I'm not going to say fear of, but their voices are going to be silent. They're not going to push up against it. We all work in industries. And sometimes we are afraid to speak up when we feel like we're not allowed to push the envelope. I definitely side with having these teams go out into the schools and being able to talk. Maybe it's a compromise where we have them come in, they do their presentations, and then after their presentations, we conquer and divide and then go into it and say, here's our questions for you, what questions do you have for us, and then come back and revisit. I just want their voices to be heard. I feel like I was selected on this team because of the people who know that I've worked here in the district, and I just want their voices to be heard, and I feel like I am being their voice.
Thank you, Shannon. Marie?
I was wondering if, being a new person on the committee, if it would be possible just to quickly go through the process that you've used. As I'm understanding it, this committee would be divided up, and a couple of people would go and speak to a group. Now, a group would consist of members from a school or members from a department within the school? How would that
It's
work?
generally the department heads for the various departments across the district. So,
Okay.
for example, last year I was on the committee with the elementary school
Mhm.
principals, and so it was a group of principals together, as
Okay.
opposed to if we met with, Tom Tussaud from maintenance, probably would just be
Okay.
Tom, or Lee, I know you met with Jason, and it was just you and Jason, because I wasn't able to attend that
Mhm.
particular one. So it's not necessarily with a group, it's
Mhm.
not with the staff members,
Mhm.
teachers, and things. It's with the department heads
So
themselves.
just take, for example, the high school, because that's my familiarity, having been a teacher there. Would you meet with department heads, or would you group the department heads and say, I'm going to meet with the science and math people? How is that done?
Dan, you've done this
As
a
I
bit.
was the liaison last year, we met with the principal and the assistant principals in their offices or in a conference room right off their offices.
Okay,
And you were open to ask them any question you had.
okay. So they would have spoken to in their department, their building leadership team, they would have spoken to the department heads and
In
gotten
theory, yes.
their feedback,
Yes.
which they would share with the liaisons.
And they each seemed to
Okay.
have a area of specificity that was more theirs than the principal's, so
Yes.
they would shift questions to whoever they felt had the best background to answer
Yeah,
them.
the vice principals, as I recall from being there, each vice principal was in charge of a set of departments within the building.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gina?
Marie, you bring up a good point. So from how it was last year, the way I look at it, it's two separate things. I don't mind if you do the global presentation for everyone. I think that's fine. So I think that's one separate format change. But then a second format change would be getting rid of the liaison meetings, which I'm against. But I guess I would just be curious. So it usually happens where then we have all of those follow-up meetings, and the follow-up meetings, the basic content of them, the main content, and what takes the most time is scheduling, high school and maintenance to come in. So would we still be doing that? Would we not? Because those are basically what our meetings are comprised of. So I would think we would still need to do that.
Yeah, I guess we would.
Yes.
Bill,
Yes,
you
you
can
would, you
speak
would
to
still be scheduling the respective schools, grade levels, Tom Tussaud, Dave Zicki, Matt for facilities and operations. So that would remain the same. Please keep in mind that the only reason I suggested this was maybe try to consolidate and save a little bit of time. It was never the intent to prevent someone from saying something to you. That's not the type of operation we have. Does that exist in some school departments? Yes, it does, but not in this one. I have to tell you, not in this one.
So to answer your question, Gina, it sounds like we would have the global presentation from administration. We would keep the department heads attending our meeting and be able to ask them questions. The question is whether we do the next level of sort of review or investigation of the individual department budgets by meeting directly with the liaison teams. Yep.
May I just say also, Jen, Excuse me, would you prefer to be called Jennifer or Jen? I don't want to be informal.
Jen is fine.
Okay. At the beginning of each budget manager's budget, there will be a template that will be filled out for any changes, any new requests for new personnel, whether they be professional, support staff, administrative, clerical in nature, any contract services, materials and supplies, other expenses, which are sometimes stipends or fees or memberships, et cetera, and new furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So you will have in front of each section everything spelled out that they are newly requesting for fiscal 2026. And they will speak to that. And you are absolutely welcome to ask any administrator, is there something that you would have liked to have had this in this budget that you probably didn't request? I mean, that's always going to be a question that's that's in bounds, quite honestly.
Anthony?
So two things. One was just that I hope on that form also that there's room and space for things coming out of the budget and not just adding in.
Yeah, Anthony, may I ask a favor?
Yes, sir.
I have no hearing in this ear, and sometimes it's difficult when there's any background noise. So I'm just ask everyone if you could speak up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just asking / recommending just to make sure that there's also room in that template for removed line items, not just new things, in case a department says, we've been investing and we can start, pulling back a little bit just to make sure that's balanced. On the main topic, I certainly feel that it's our duty, our responsibility, I think it's RSA, that we're to obviously come up with an appropriate budget. And personally, I believe that getting as close as you can to the raw, unfiltered information source and down into the details to really ask those questions, get into the nitty-gritty, is the appropriate thing to do. Also in favor of hearing whatever the high-level presentation is. In fact, I think we're going to get some of that today. And then the third and separate item that Gina pointed out was those presentations here from those department heads, and I think that all three of those are appropriate.
Dan?
Yeah, but Anthony, those presentations here are after the liaison meetings are held. Okay, so, and basically what we do is present their budget for them. Okay?
Rachel?
Thank you. I just want to say thanks, Bill and Matt. I appreciate both sides of this. I think it can be accomplished in either fashion. I understand trying to consolidate because by the time the presenters, the budget owners are coming here to present, it's probably at least their fourth time presenting the same material. One, because they've got to build the budget with administration, so that's talking about it once. They then go to the school board to present that information. They present it at our liaison meeting, and then they come here and present it to the larger group. So I get that. Like, it's a lot of time talking about the same thing. I do think if there was a form, like you said, if some type of form where whether we divide and conquer in each group, is, a liaison team were to tackle that part of the budget and submit questions through a form where we have questions. I think there is value in that too, because it also lets people have the time to gather information and present it to us. I also can appreciate having those smaller conversations in liaison team meetings. You definitely you pick up some nice little tidbits of information, but from my experience the past couple of years, nothing has been so drastic of a change to our budget that it's never presented something that was so like, oh, that was missed. We really need to consider that. But it's good information just for the community to have. So I can see it both ways. But if those types of things are still able to be kind of drawn out in a bigger session here, because we can still ask questions, I'm not opposed to trying a new way. Just to save those budget owners, their time, because it is a long process for them. They work long days as it is, and then to have to come out and present this 4 or 5 different times for the same thing, I value their time too. So I can see it both ways, but I think I am leaning towards, trying to change the process a little.
So just to be clear, whatever the committee decides tonight, Mackenzie and I will work with the administration to develop the plan on who presents when and all of that. There may be opportunities to eliminate situations where folks have presented the same information over and over. So regardless of the planning piece and which meetings and things like that, we'll find a way to get done what we need to get done. Most important is that the committee has an opportunity to vote on this proposed change. Lee?
Thank you, Jen. It occurs to me as, Rachel, thank you for bringing that to our attention, that they are submitting these or proposing these things at several different intervals. Maybe, Naomi, you could talk to me for a minute about, I believe we had talked about sharing some meetings with the school board. Was that on kind of,
We would love to.
okay. Would it
It's
be?
not something logistically that we've thought that the committee was interested in.
Yep.
That would be amazing, because it really would. A lot of times, especially to Rachel's point of these people, not only are they presenting these things 4 or 5 times, what I found as the school board liaison sitting in these meetings is a lot of the questions that came up were questions they'd already been asked by the school board. So they're presenting
Precisely.
the same things, they're answering the same questions.
Right.
And these meetings go long, and if they're at the high school, they probably started their workday at 7 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, it would be, if we found a way to work together and to all hear the presentations at the same time, I think that would be excellent.
We would be very much in favor of that.
I would too.
Right, that would save a lot of people's time, a lot of energy. We could consolidate, to Rachel's point.
Absolutely.
And that might actually bring some cohesiveness between these two distant
I absolutely
bodies.
agree. We've talked, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it, but we've talked about this several times, that there has to be a method that, this is not our side of the fence and this is your side. It's 1 yard, and we're all trying to gain as much information as possible about where we are in this school district and where we need to go. And the more you know, the more the school board knows, the better off we're going to be, the better off the deliberative session attendees are going to be, and ultimately the voters. It is, and I hate to use this expression because it's used too often, it is all about transparency.
Pat, you have a comment?
I do. What you're talking about is a joint meeting that both the Budget Committee and the school board would be talking together, and that would not be fit at Town Hall. We'd be sitting here doing it. Just so you're aware, but if the school board made choices. The other comment, somebody asked about a historical perspective on the liaison teams. The liaison teams usually meet with the department heads and the principals after the school board budget recommendation is made, and it gives the Budget Committee a chance to talk to the department heads and the principals about the impact of those cuts, that how they would manage, or they can manage and they're fine, or they would really like this returned. But that's when it started. Last year it didn't happen because the school board finished their budget, and then we got it the next day. But there was a reason why the liaison team started, and they go out after the cuts, or after the school board recommendation. But just be advised that planning for a joint meeting, both boards have to post a meeting, both boards have to do minutes and be able to vote and talk, and that's the logistics of that.
Perhaps that might be one of our otherwise noted meetings. Caitlin?
I think we all have with our packet the school board meeting, budget meetings when they're already planning to have those presentations. So if we could attend those, then that would eliminate them having to present it again, and they could still plan to come to the other scheduled dates when we have questions for them, right? Isn't that, so that way they're not presenting it, and they also wouldn't have to present it at the liaison meeting itself. You know, it could be more of the conversation about the questions that people have had together, kind of thing.
Right, so they would present once in a joint meeting to everyone, and then we could still have our liaison meetings or not, whatever this committee decides, and then we can still have them come in and answer questions. If we feel like that's the next step that we want to do, we could always submit our questions and get written answers, and then only ask them to come in if we, want more information on a specific department. We can flex a little bit on what our plan is. The important thing tonight is to make a decision on whether we want to keep the liaison teams meetings or not. Caitlin?
I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that, because you were saying that having the joint meeting wouldn't be able to, but we wouldn't necessarily have to be able to speak. We would just have to be able to attend, to listen to them present, and they can ask the school board can ask their questions. We can listen to it, and then we can have, when they have we have our liaison teams, and then when they, whenever the days that were scheduled on here for us to have the reviews, they would be in attendance, and we would be able to ask them further questions from there. Is that not?
That is a
just
possibility,
making
but it would eliminate our ability to ask questions at that meeting if it was not a joint meeting and we were just attending as public. Then we would only be able to ask questions during public participation, which would limit us to be able to do that level of review at that time. It's not saying we couldn't do it, but that it would limit us in that way. Gina, did you have a comment? Anthony?
Thanks. I'm getting a shoulder workout over here. So, obviously, this is my first year on the committee. I haven't been through this process before, and perhaps what feels like rigmarole, I'm not really clear. But I do believe, in no uncertain terms, that the roles and responsibilities are different between this committee and the school board committee. I think it's our job to do our absolute utmost, our due diligence, to put together the actual budget. And the school board's job is to administer that budget faithfully. And so if everybody just does the same thing at the same time, there'll be fewer questions able to be asked because they won't be able to all fit in the same session. And what would even be the point of having multiple committees if everybody's just, powwowed in the same thing? So again, I'm not sure if that perspective is based on the fact that I haven't been through this before, but I think there's a reason that there's a budget committee which is separate from the school board. They have different roles, different responsibilities, and I don't believe that we should try to contract our role and our responsibilities for simplicity's sake. And, if the heads, no disrespect, but if they have to talk 3 or 4 times in order to make sure that they get the points across to all the proper stakeholders and different groups throughout the organization, it just seems like business is as it should be to me.
Matt?
Do you mind if I chime in?
Please do.
Okay. I've been doing this for 30 years, and the Budget Committee and the school board have different statutory authority. And I have to agree with Anthony. I thought you put it very well. To have a joint meeting, who's going to be the chair? Who's going to be taking the motions? How are you going to do votes? You have distinct different roles as far as recommending to the public what is prudent and what isn't prudent. On the MS-27, which is a municipal services form, you got 2 columns. You got a recommended by the Budget Committee column, and you got a recommended by the school board column. If you're going to have a joint meeting, are those 2 columns the same? What if the Budget Committee disagrees with the board at the same meeting? How does that work itself out? Do you take 2 separate votes? I mean, it's just a little bit problematic from my standpoint, and I'd like to have clear-cut roles defined. And that's just my opinion from doing this for a very long time, that I've never seen a joint school board, town council, when I was on the town side, budget committee meeting ever in the state of New Hampshire. So just my opinion.
Thank you for adding that context as well. Oh, Brian?
Just on the other side of that, this is my first time, not 30 years. So removing any part of the process that I've never seen, I'd be hard pressed to do it. Like, it all sounds great, but like Anthony, kind of like when Anthony said, I'm not really sure what it was in the first place. So to shut it down, not even having seen it, I don't know. That's
Lee? Oh, Rachel, were you next? I didn't see your hand.
I think we have an opportunity here to do something different. We've struggled for a while with the school board, and it seems like this might be an opportunity for us to take and resolve some of the outstanding drama that exists. I'd like to hear from our media guy in the back to see logistically what that might mean for them, because they're running the audio, et cetera. If we were to have several other bodies here at the same time. Yeah, please.
Yeah, Justin, if you would.
I understand there's some logistics that we need to configure, but I think saving our able-bodied members that are leading their individual teams that extra evening or two sitting and regurgitating the same information is valuable time for them, right? So go ahead.
Logistically, it would pretty much just be longer tables. The only problem we have is that we have all the microphone inputs that we have in right now. So I think the biggest problem would just be sharing microphones. And I think other than that, I think we'd have coverage of the room. It would take pretty much the same amount of time to set up, I would think.
Okay.
But logistically on the media end, I don't see anything much different other than sharing microphones and kind of just a larger space as far as that goes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have a question for him? Okay.
Gina?
So,
I'm sorry, Rachel, you were next.
so, yeah, you were
Then
next,
Gina.
Rachel.
I wasn't quite finished, though.
Oh, go ahead.
If I could
Carry
just wrap
on.
it up. Thank you. I did want to hear the expert's opinion in the back, because this is their show, right? I understand the new people's perspective and point about kind of not seeing how the process had worked in the past, but I think with a little bit of effort and consolidation, we can make it a smoother process. We wouldn't have to, there's a lot of overlap when we're asking questions. The school board has asked the same questions as we've talked, as Bill's mentioned, right? These questions kind of seem to come in the same way. I sincerely think we could divide the two, the school board on one side and us on the budget committee on the other, and could have our own meetings in a way. It would take some logistic configuring, but I think we could manage the process if we put some thought to it, and we wouldn't miss anything on either committee, right? We'd just be kind of consolidating evenings for everybody, for the school board, for us, and for the teachers and department heads. I see a real value there for our community. Thank you.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is Matt. I think you were the one that said it. I don't see it as us combining roles or not following statute. I think this is I think it would be the first step in gathering information, and then you segregate, right? But to hear the same message, because if you listen to the school, and so this is from a public and or budget committee member, if you hear the school board meetings, go to them or listen to them, online. You go to the liaison meetings, you hear the same thing from the liaison team, and then you come here and you hear it a third time. Again, I know that those budget owners have already talked to you at least 1 or 2 times, so that's their 4th or 5th round. I don't think we're combining at that point. I think we're really just trying to get the information out in a more efficient manner, and then being able to dig in as a school board, as budget committee. Budget committee will know what the school board recommends. We can still have a round 2 if needed, right, to bring, and I say round 2, but it's built into our schedule, so it's not even a round 2 at that point. It's just following our process.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. So you're talking about initially coming together as a full group and hearing presentations. And then are you then suggesting after the initial round of presentations where you go through the whole process, then you separate and make your own conclusions based upon what you heard together? Or are you making those determinations together as a joint school board budget committee meeting?
No. I'm only gathering this. I feel like this got momentum, at some point in the meeting. Originally, Bill, you had said, you're going to be the one to, to make the more top-level overview presentations. The vote was for, or this discussion was about having liaison teams or not. And somehow I feel like we've morphed into, if we can, it sounds like it's going, if we can get the information in a more efficient manner. It sounds like liaison team meetings are supported. It also sounds like they're supported, either way, but it would be in a repetitive manner. School board would get their presentations, Bill would present here, and we'd still have, potentially have the same message being said 2 to 3 times.
So that's sort of what I was saying before, is that we can work on the planning and the logistics of the presentation piece and trying to eliminate rework through the way that the information is presented. But again, tonight's vote is about the liaison team meetings, about whether this committee wants to continue them or not. So I think it was Gina and then Marie.
Yeah, so I was going to make that same point, if we can vote on the liaison meetings, but also, and I just confirmed this with Naomi, I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree, but I believe the first meeting on December 2nd is just presenting. You're not going to be making any recommendations. You're not going to be, doing any warrant articles. So I think, yep.
It's possible that we won't even be asking any questions at that meeting, that will merely be a presentation where we'll receive the information and we'll get our budget books and we'll go back and we'll think on it a week, and then we'll have follow-up meetings where we
Historically, the first meeting has been the superintendent's general overview of the budget, where we stand as far as the bottom line is, what the percentage increase is, what the default budget is, and how much the budget is over or under the default budget.
And I think that would be appropriate for a combined, because there's no decisions being made, and it would save both of you time, but then the process would continue and split. But yes, can I make a motion to vote on the?
Let me just
actually
add one more thing.
Yep.
There's also no reason why the budget committee, if that is the case and it's just a presentation and a listening, there's no reason why the budget committee couldn't attend as a public participation or watch online, right? Because
I would think though, if that's the only time that they're going to present that general to us, that it would have to be, I would want it to be formal, because they wouldn't be coming back to us then and making the same general presentation. I mean, they'd be doing it once. So I would think that it would need to be a formal meeting for us.
Okay. Oh, we have more questions. Marie.
Microphone. I kind of like your suggestion, Gina, but if we did that, going to Matt's point, such a meeting, I think, would not be characterized as a school board meeting. It would be characterized as a joint presentation to the school board and the budget committee. And I think both committees should be characterized in the in the titling of the meeting as being on equal footing. It's not a school board meeting and, oh, by the way, here's the budget committee. I think we both need to have our yeah.
Okay.
And can I make a motion on the liaison?
You can, but we have
Oh,
one more comment, and
sorry.
then the motion is coming.
And I'll make it very quick. I just want to kind of, I guess, reiterate.
Is your
um,
mic on?
Yes, sorry. Just want to reiterate, my belief is that the larger that meeting is, the fewer people questions will be able to get asked. It's only going to, if you have 20 people in a room versus 12 and then 8 or whatever, a bunch of people are just going to sit on their questions because you don't want it to be a 6-hour meeting. So I believe that more questions will be able to get asked if it remain separate, but I know that's unrelated to liaisons.
My understanding of Gina's idea was that the two committees would be together for a presentation. There would not be any questions asked. And then we would have our own meetings with the presenter, and they wouldn't have to present. They would be asked our questions at that point. That was my understanding.
Again, we can architect how
yeah.
the meetings work.
Yeah.
It sounded like we wanted to move forward with the
Yeah.
motion, unless, Dan, you have something burning that you'd like to share.
I want to share my experience. I was an executive in educational publishing, so I ran national meetings. I was the person out front, like you, Bill. I thought I had everything in a row. At the public meetings, everything went fine, but almost universally, there was the rumblings behind the scenes of somebody who didn't agree with everything going on. Anytime you do a public meeting, and I agree that you run a great organization. If anything I said cast aspersions on that, please throw them away. I feel wonderful about you, and I hope you know that. But it always will happen that there's something out there that you can find in a different way, and that's my major point.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Can I move that we retain the liaison meetings?
Do we have a second? Gina, second?
I'll second.
Gina, seconded.
Oh, okay.
All in favor of retaining the liaison meetings? Raise your hand. Eight in favor, all opposed? 3? I don't think anybody abstained. Okay, so this committee's decision is to retain the liaison team meetings. Bill and Matt, I will work with you on the logistics of how we plan out the meetings.
That's fine. And please know, the intent was not to make it more difficult for you to obtain information. It was just to save some time. But whatever makes you feel more comfortable, that's what we live by.
Hopefully, we can work together to find some time savings and reduce redundancy in the way that we structure our meetings. And now that we've sort of opened the floor for more communication and better alignment between the school board and this budget committee and administration, I think that we can find some efficiencies there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next business before the committee. I'd like to invite Assistant Superintendent Matt Chevenot to deliver a short presentation to us on the fiscal year 23-24 year-end review.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Been here for a couple of decades now. I've had the pleasure to always introduce a surplus at year-end. I've never had the displeasure of talking about a deficit at year-end. as some other districts have been in that unfortunate predicament as of late. Last year, we returned $6.2 million to reduce taxes, so that was our surplus. This year, we're looking at $3,667,000. Basically, what happens is you have a budget, and if you underexpend your budget, you've got money left over. You also have an estimated revenues which equal to the amount of your budget, and if you collect more than you estimate, then you have a revenue surplus. Once you add those two together, then you have what's called, increase, you have a total fund balance, basically. And due to the new law that was passed a couple years ago and was adopted by the district, we have the ability to retain surplus. So this year, we retained around $350,000 more than last year. So we have a total of around $850,000 in surplus in case of emergency or in case of any, let's say this year we used it for some instructional materials, and I'll get to those, that we woefully needed, that were cut from the operating budget. So we decided by vote of the school board and with the authority in a public hearing to go ahead and spend those monies. It was specifically on a reading program, Wit and Wisdom, which is really kind of benefiting all the students in the district up to grades 8, I believe. And it's been a phenomenal program. You know, when you build a budget, and this is 23-24, we built that in 22-23. And it's really kind of difficult to have everybody stay put in their own positions. We probably had at least maybe in that period of time 175 people come and go. Had a lot of turnover in the district. So when you look through some of the detail of the ups and the downs and the negatives and the positives and everything like that, if they were the same bodies in those seats and they stepped up on the salary chart, you wouldn't see that. But it's a whole different crew coming in. Right now, we had a surplus of around $2 million in the professional salaries account. You know, out of $30 million, we spent $28 million, so we had $2 million there. Support staff salaries, the custodians, their paras, everything like that. We haven't hired a new custodian probably in around 4 years. So, but we still have to hold those positions open. We cannot reduce those positions. We have to hold those open in case we do get custodians to come in. We've been supplementing both the lack of teaching staff and the lack of custodians via contracted services right now. When you look at benefits, when you don't have enough employees that you had planned for, you're going to not pay as much for health insurance. So that is something that is adds to the surplus that we have. The maintenance item we have, we renegotiated gas and electric through 2029. We got a really good deal. I actually called up Liberty Utilities, and I said, are you sure that our meters are working correctly? Because I'm not paying that much for gas, you know? I didn't even want to say it, but I had to because I didn't want to be surprised 2 or 3 years down the road and have someone else in my position get hit with a huge bill saying, what the heck was Cheminel doing back in the day, right? So that was definitely something we wanted to take care of. You see in special services that it's over by $1 million, right? But when you look at the wages that are under by 1.9, a lot of that is contracted services through White Birch, through Laureen Doro, through a multitude of other agencies, Boothby. We've been contracting out for special ed teachers. We've been contracting out for paraprofessionals. We call them IEP assistants. We've been subcontracting out for a lot of those areas that we just can't get the help in. This year's looking a little bit better, I would say, as far as our hiring process goes. Things are starting to turn around. And this is all, because this is 2023-24, and it's the result of the COVID effect. A lot of people left education. A lot of people don't look at this as a viable economic career path anymore. A lot of these people think that this is not something long-term that I want to go into. And so there's been a lot of retirements, a lot of people leaving the field, and now we're starting to see it pick up a little bit so we can fill those positions that were emptied. And we'd much rather have our own employees that we can train, we can maintain them, we can give them supports, as opposed to some of the contracted services providers that we've had to hire, which are excellent in and of themselves. But it's always much better to have your own employees, especially when you dealing with kids in schools and parents and everything like that. They're just much more vested in everything. Basically, you know, the audit, the legal, we were over on legal quite a bit. We had a few issues here and there. I can't really talk about those at all. Nothing egregious or anything like that. There was just a lot of legal situations that needed to take care of. In the upcoming budget, we're probably going to increase that line from $60,000 to $80,000 to try and cover that. So we have had that going on, and it's been an ongoing issue. With all the people coming in, people going, criminal background checks, we've had to do a ton of fingerprinting because we have a ton of new people coming in. So that's why you kind of see that as a bit of an overage. Bonded debt, you can see that. That was our last year of payment in 23-24. Middle school was paid off in that line, and we had a savings as far as the interest. Every year we go out and we go through the municipal bond bank, and they do kind of like a little reissue, and they give us a little rebate on the interest rates if they've gone down. And so customarily we have seen that. So that's basically the appropriation surplus of it, and it adds up to, you know, $3.2 million, which out of $88 million budget isn't bad. That's pre-COVID surplus that we're talking about right now. During the COVID period, because we couldn't hire anyone, and I don't even know how we got through that, but we used to have like an $8 million surplus. So we've been on a strategy to bring the surplus down slowly over the years. I don't want it to drop precipitously, because that means your taxes are going to go up. What you don't return in surplus, you make up in taxes. So we're just trying to level things off to have a reasonable amount of surplus available at the end of the year, because when we do our financial audits, which will be coming out in the next month or so after they're done binding the books and everything like that, all that information goes to S&P, it goes to Moody's, it goes to all the financial institutions, and it helps us with our bond rate. And why is that? Because it proves to those who are going to issue bonds to us, if we have a construction project, that we have the ability, in case of an emergency, in order to keep operating, because we have a cash surplus. We're not going hand to mouth, you know, and if something dreadful were to happen, we would have the assets to do that. It also affects the town of Merrimack. So if the town of Merrimack wanted to bond, let's say, a new safety complex for $36 million, right? We have to put our financials along with their financials, because we're rated as one entity. So if the school district was coming in at a deficit or had like a minimal surplus, it would hurt the town of Merrimack when they go out to do these large projects. So we're kind of all in it together. Town of Merrimack has a really nice surplus right now. It's very appropriate for what they do. And so we're both in we're financially healthy because of this. The revenue surplus was around, $800,000. We had some revenue from outside sources that came in that we weren't sure that we were going to get at the time. I can flip over to page, let's see. That's food service. Let me get back one. Yeah, food service expended revenue, general fund revenue, okay. Yeah, page 23. You know, you can see the 87,695, 851 equals to the appropriation, and you could see interest. Interest on investments was one thing that we hadn't planned on. We have a very good working relationship with TD Bank, and we've been with them for quite a while. We do positive pay, which means we push all our check numbers to the bank so they know exactly what to look for, so it prevents fraud. Because they already know what checks are out there that are outstanding before you go to the bank to try and cash a check. We caught a few people trying to do that too, because they get very clever nowadays as far as how they can get the same kind of card stock, they can do everything, they can manipulate everything, and so we've caught a few of them tried to double dip on that. And so that helps us out with our interest rates because we're less of a risk, and we go out and we get some good investments along the way. And so we hadn't planned on that, but you know, it's probably going to be like that into the future. So we'll estimate a little bit higher, but I don't want to get too much higher just in case it goes the other way. It's always something that you want to be mindful of. And I was asked to kind of put together on the bottom of on the mid of page 3, we had $500,000 in surplus funds, and we chose to make a purchase out of that $500,000. But what my auditors did, because I wanted to take it out of the $500,000 balance sheet account, they made me reverse that entry and put it against the expenditure account, which I'm going to have a chat with them this year, because I didn't feel comfortable with that, but that's what they told me to do. But it was wit and wisdom for MES, RFS, TFS, and JMUs. I don't know, Bill, if you want to give them any background on what that is and what that's going to do for us.
Well, we did not have a cohesive, coordinated, consistent literacy program at the elementary level, and this was absolutely crucial. When I first started here, and I'll be very brief, one of the things I noticed is our curriculum was aging, and aging substantially. That our test scores were not where they needed to be. And I'm proud to be able to say that they are increasing and improving in the state assessment score. But this was a lot of work by Amy Doyle, our assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, the staff that she met with. This was the program selected, and it is a comprehensive literacy program that really will serve our students extraordinarily well. And so when we had an opportunity to purchase it, we purchased it because every year that we were to delay that was a lost year from our perspective for our elementary students.
And so that was approved by the school board. It was advertised in the newspaper per stat. Well, actually, I asked the state if I had to do a public hearing, formal, like with the advertisement in the newspaper, and they weren't quite sure, so I'm not taking any chances. So I took an ad out in the newspaper. Kind of continuing on, food service is doing well. We got a $390,000 surplus. That is retained every single year. The food service is a self-sufficient fund. It doesn't cost anything as far as tax dollars go. But we have to use up that surplus to some degree. We can't carry that larger number into perpetuity or even grow it any further. So there's going to be in the budget coming up some major capital improvements in the food service programs. Maybe some renovations of the JMU's kitchen, which is probably, I don't know, 50-something years old, I would imagine, Pat, I guess, right? and some of the warmers and maybe some of the steam tables and the ovens and stuff like that. So we're going to look to make an expenditure as far as that goes. That's going to be a capital improvement that you'll see in Dave Zicky's budget, or we'll just pull it from the surplus amount. I have at the end a list of the default account numbers that we look at. Basically, what we're doing is, if you take last year's budget, you take the teachers' contracted salaries, those are all teacher contracted salaries. You take the support staff contracted salaries, those are all voted on by the legislative body and approved. So you have those two items. You have special education. There's a number of out-of-district placements that we're looking at for next year. This all goes back to the special ed laws in 1975, U.S. Code 94-192. It was reauthorized in 1990. It's about free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment possible. It's a federal law, and we have to abide by that. Just recently, we probably were aware of a few out-of-district placements that are coming in that are going to cost some money, and it's something that we by law have to do. And so hence, because it is the law, we have to put that in the default budget. We also have health insurance in there too. That was around a 9.9% increase on the point of service plan and around a 14.5 or 14.9, 14.4 on the site of service plan. That's a contractual obligation in the labor contracts for both the teachers and the support staff, so that has to be in there. One of the things we did take out from the default budget is last year we had a warrant article for a roof. So if you have a special warrant article, you take that out. You don't take that credit and you dump it in your operating budget and be the benefactor of something like that. If the roof was incorporated in the operating budget, we used to do that years ago, then we could carry it forward because it's likely to reoccur in future budgets. That's a key term in the law, likely to reoccur. But because it's a warrant article, we have to take it out. We have a transportation contract in there. It's 5% increase. There is no fuel escalation clause in there. So it turned out to be a pretty good deal as far as when the cost of fuel shot up to well over $4 a gallon. There are a lot of districts kind of struggling with how to make ends meet and how to continue their bus service because they were paying a fuel surplus charge. We didn't have to worry about that because we have a very good relationship with STA, and we hope to continue that. Essentially, that's kind of the items that are in the default budget. I've got a rough draft with a lot of scribbles on it, but I'm not going to pass it out because it's still in process. I'm not sure if there are any questions on this as far as large expenditure goes. I know that was a question. We have a capital improvement plan. It's a 5-year plan. It's still under review. Last Planning and Building Committee, I just kind of passed it out real quick as an informational thing while we were discussing other items. So they haven't ruled on it first. The process is the School District Planning and Building Committee looks at the CIP. They will eventually make modifications, changes, recommendations, and then that version will go to the school board, then it'll be approved after that. And so at that point in time, then we'll bring it out to the School District Budget Committee because chances are some of those items may be a warrant article. What we usually have, and what I can say what's kind of on there right now, rough cut, is we have another roof. We've been doing roofs for a number of years. And the good thing about that program that we have been doing is in around 3 years from after next year, when we get in year 5, we're not going to have to do a roof for a 10-year period. I know people talk about capital reserve accounts, and I know we get criticized for not creating capital reserve accounts because we've always been in the position of having to play catch-up all the time. But after the 5th year, where there's no roof for 10 years, that's a prime example for you guys to think about to start a capital reserve account for roofs or for pavement or any large expenditures like that. Let's say the last roof we do is $800,000. Instead of dropping your tax rate by $800,000, if you're used to that level of expenditure, why not take it, put it in a capital reserve account for 10 years, then you have $8 million to take care of your roofs into the future, and you kind of keep that going. And it puts you on a real good solid ground. At least that's my philosophy. May not be yours, but that's for up to you to decide. That's why we have elected boards, to kind of help us make those kind of decisions. And in addition, last but not least, we are still discussing the central office. You may have heard about that, I believe. And right now, we're in a process where we've gotten a couple of quotations, one from Ekman Construction, one from Hutter Construction. We're dealing with Paul Marinase of Marinase and Associates. He's the architect. He's putting together all the numbers. The last number that we put out there was $6.2 million. And this is for remember last year we had the larger building that really served our needs, and then it went to $4.8 million kind of right before the vote, and that didn't work out too well for us, did it now? So we're going back to the larger office that'll have the space to meet our needs now and into the future, so we won't get in a predicament of building the house that Jack built, where you have addition after addition after addition after addition, which is really tough. You look at this school, it's probably 7 additions on this school. You look at the upper elementary school, it's probably 6 additions. I should bring that sheet and show you. It's shocking when you look at it. You see all the different additions, and you wonder why the HVAC system is what it is and doesn't play nicely all throughout the building. It's because everything has been piecemeal, and it's tough to do that. So if we're going to do something, I think the consensus of the committee thus far, I don't know if it is or not, that's yet to be seen, but to build the building for now and for the future. So that's where we're at with that. You've got these 3 capital items that maybe we're talking about. O'Gara Drive is another one. When you leave here, go out and drive down O'Gara Drive and see how many times your car bounces up and down. Look at the sidewalk and think and say to yourself, is that a proper sidewalk? Does that have a proper curbing? If I were just to roll up on that sidewalk, would I put a pedestrian in harm's way? Could I roll up on that sidewalk quite easily? The answer to that is probably yes. So that's something we're looking at, probably taking a look at replacing along with the roadway. And that's not an inexpensive item. So maybe it gets done this year, maybe it doesn't get done this year, I don't know. But it's been talked about for a very long time. On the Town Center Committee, of which I am a member, I believe you probably all know Nelson Disco. He's the esteemed chairman of that committee, a wonderful human being. I love working with him and everybody else on that committee. They have been working with the school board to get a sidewalk all the way around here, all the way down to Babusick Lake Road, so people can make the loop. If you're ever here working on a Saturday or a holiday or something like, well, you're not working here on a Saturday, I am, Bill is too. You see people do the loop all the way around, and it's a nice area for people. And plus, when you have kids and they're getting out at the end of the day, it can be a tad hectic, right? And to have a nice sidewalk so kids could walk to their cars safely with a nice curb that won't allow a car to mount that sidewalk, I think is a real good safety feature. So it's something to look at into the future. Like to do it sooner than later, but you know, there are priorities and we all have to pick and choose, and that's what you guys do. You help us make those decisions. So that's basically it for me.
Great. Thank
So-
you for that thoughtful and thorough presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just a note to the committee, I would like to table any questions about the capital improvement plan or the administrative building that may be planned to another meeting. So if you have questions specifically about last year's budget to expenditures, that's what I would like us to focus on at this point. And also be mindful that all questions are important questions, but let's not get in the weeds of very small dollar amounts. Okay? Naomi?
I just wanted to say the reason to hold off on the questions about things in the capital improvement plan and those projects is because they haven't been decided on yet. The Planning and Building
No.
Committee hasn't finished their work. They haven't presented to the school board, and the school board, according to our schedule, is going to be deciding our recommendations on those things in the middle of December. So that will be the time when like there's more information and we can have real conversations about it as opposed to speculation. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any questions? Anthony?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple few. Let's see, so
Just
first,
make sure that we all lean into the mic.
okay. First question, so I was looking at the groups that were gonna come and
Oh, yeah,
present.
sure, yeah.
And it sounds like, so special ed is in here, it seems like, you know, respectable cost driver. Just to be clear, is there like a liaison group affiliated with like special ed? Okay,
Yes,
peace.
sir.
I just wanted to be sure. And then, second question, you'd mentioned a few times this ability to retain surplus.
Yes.
I think that's something that had gotten voted in like a few years ago. Can
Couple
you
years ago,
Remind me,
yes.
what's the cap and the mechanism for that?
It's, you had to have a warrant article on the ballot, and the RSA states that you can retain up to 5% of your net assessment. So whatever your budget is, less all your revenues, less your fund balance that you're going to use to reduce taxes, that's your net assessment. So our cap right now is probably, I remember from last year, it's around $3.4 million is the max we could ever do. Would I ever sit here before you and say we're going to retain $3.4 million? I don't think so, because I like my job, and I want to stay working here. But that's the way it works. I can email you the
Peace.
whole thing.
Oh, I would appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we do more of a virtual.
I can give it to the,
retention.
Jennifer, I could send you the whole link.
Yeah, send it to me and I'm happy
Yeah,
to send it out
yeah.
to the committee.
Because it is something new, because for years, when I used to work for the town, I could retain surplus. I'd be up at the Department of Revenue Administration, we'd be setting the tax rate. Ed Rainville, old guy there, you know, he'd say, okay, Matt, your rate's gonna be like 5 1/4. I says, geez, Ed, you know, how do I make it 4.95? He says, well, you need to give us a little more surplus. I says, okay, let's throw another couple $100,000. It was like that back in the day. And when you're in a town, you can do that. But when you were in a school district, you couldn't. So my first year back in '98, when I flipped over to the dark side, which is what people called me when I went to the school district, believe it or not. It's kind of an inside joke, but you get it. I asked DRA, I says, okay, I want to retain some surplus. And they said, you can't. I says, are you kidding me? What do you mean I can't? I could do that for 8 years on the town side. They says, no, you can't do that. I says, well, where does it say I can't? It doesn't. I said, well, then I can. They said, no, you can't. And so we went back and forth. So, you know, it took like 15, 20 years to finally change the law, and it finally came on the books to allow us to retain up to 5%, as I explained. And I think it's a good thing because, you know, if we ever had a catastrophe or we ever had something that didn't make it in the budget that we really needed, like this Wit and Wisdom program, we hold a public hearing, We have people come and give commentary on it, and it's all driven by the school board. So it is a valuable tool to have.
Thanks. And then one other question, and I'll be quiet, but help me understand if this is an appropriate question for this meeting. But, so, yeah, I heard a lot, gosh, I think this was even the default budget year, and it seems like surplus is going pretty well. But when I was looking at the numbers, I saw, you know, it looks like this trend, I heard about the surplus, here's the spending numbers, got that. Over like 2018, 19, 20, 21, all through those years, spending was kind of around like 72.5 plus or minus $1 million. And then suddenly kind of like into 22, it bumped 6 million. In 23, it bumped 5 million above that. And now into 24, looking at the expected numbers, it's gonna bump like another 5 million over that. And so it's been like $5+ million growth 3 years running. In terms of spending, not talking about surplus.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
can you just
gotcha.
help like put that into context? Like what is causing this like surge in these last 3 years of spending like $5 million+ per year? And like where's the end game? Does it ever go back? Like can you help put that into context?
A lot of it has to do with the cost of health insurance. When you get a 10% increase on a $14 million bill, that's a lot of stuff. And the health insurance has increased. New Hampshire retirement increased also. I mean, if you're on the town side and you're a police officer, the town pays probably 35% of your gross salary towards the New Hampshire retirement system. So it's New Hampshire retirement system, it's health insurance benefits, and it's definitely special ed. The out-of-district placements costs have gone up considerably in that area. And plus, we passed some pretty good labor contracts in those areas because of years of kind of, I want to say underpaying our staff. Can I say that? Yeah.
If you look at, I don't think we have like a pie chart on here, but if you look at like the sort of where all of the different large amounts of money go in this budget, the vast majority of it is on staffing. And the only way to hold a budget steady like that over a period of years, as you saw, is to not increase in some significant places, and we were not paying our staff competitively. And what we were seeing happen was we were getting wonderful, bright new teachers fresh out of college, and we were training them up for a year or 2 or 3, and then they were moving on to a neighboring district where they could immediately make significantly more money. And so we were training teachers for all of the surrounding towns, and we were finding that that's not a great, sustainable way to educate our children. And so a lot of those big increases were driven by those teacher contracts. One of the board's main goals the past couple of years has to become competitive in those markets so that we are not only attracting those bright new teachers, but we're keeping them, and we're keeping them in our system and having that consistency for our kids. So it's a lot of that. That was an issue that the board has really been working hard to address. And we really appreciate the support of the community on that as well. I think even last year, which was a tough budget year, one of the things I was intensely grateful for was the fact that the community came forward and they voted for those increases for the support staff, who were also, I mean, some of them were barely making more than $10 an hour when they were coming in, and that's just not enough.
So 2 follow-up questions on that, and thank you. One, at the top of this sheet that we just looked at, the largest unspent piece of budget was for professional salaries. So it's just interesting that there's, $1.9 million of unspent monies that were designated for that purpose. It just seems, at first blush, I'm sure there's complex reasons, but at first blush, out of sync with the strategy. The other main question that I really wanted to ask, and actually, I was nervous about that answer. So if health insurance and special ed continuous growth are the main reasons, and I guess it picked up around 3 years ago, does that mean it's just going to keep blowing up by another $5 million per year?
Not necessarily. You know something, Anthony? It varies year to year. There have been years, I will never forget this. I'll tell you a little story, okay? I went into a budget committee meeting. When the budget committee was doing police and fire and highway, it was at the old town hall. The town hall, when the town hall was a courthouse upstairs, right? And I'm sitting there, and I had a 27% increase in health insurance. And I had to announce that in front of the budget committee. And I needed another $850,000 in the budget to cover that. You want to talk about the air being sucked out of the room and everybody just sitting there in silence while I wanted to crawl under the table? That was one of those times. But it is something that goes up and down. We've actually had rate decreases in the future, I mean, in the past. Average rate increases usually around 4 to 5, but you get these spikes that go up and down. They've kind of changed, I don't want to say ownership, but they've changed management up there at the Health Trust. And hopefully they'll do a better job of trying to maintain things at an even keel. They were putting a lot of their money in stop-loss insurance. You know, you get claims over like a couple $100,000, but the stop-loss insurance was costing them so much more than if they had just paid the claims. So they looked at that over the course of time, and they realized that that wasn't profitable for them. So they're doing a lot of things to try and contain costs and trying to build a better business model. And a lot of people say, you know, you have the Anthem product, right, which is what we buy from the Health Trust. Why don't you go out and buy it directly from Anthem? We can't. There's a law on the books saying in order for us to get Anthem, we have to buy it through the Health Trust. And that's through the public, not utility, but it's through the insurance exchange at the state level. So that's something we just can't do. Because I tried it once and it didn't work out for me, you know. But I don't foresee that going that 15% or 10% into perpetuity. I just don't see it. I think this is a one-year aberration, then we're going to get back down to like 3 or 4%.
So this is the third year in a row, but
Yeah,
you think this will be the last year?
I
And then you'll see
think
it
so.
level
Yeah,
out, go back
I
down?
think so. And there have been some years where we've actually gotten a premium holiday, which you get around $2 million back from the health insurance company. You know, you give that back to the taxpayers, and then you share that with the people who are paying the premiums out of pocket, right? And then the following year, you'd get hit with like a 12% increase. In my mind, that's a little bit, that sends a mixed message. Why are you giving me $2 million to hit me with a 12% increase the following year? Makes no sense. So I think there are changes up there that are going to help level that out. And we're keeping an eye on them, believe me.
Naomi?
I haven't, it's not the answer, but it's the answer that my logical brain comes to when you ask, you know, why is there a $2 million overage in that salary line? We have about 700 employees in the district, right? Mm-hmm. I just quick did on my calculator, 2 million divided by 700, which comes out to be a little less than $3,000. So when you're estimating a salary for a person, right, you don't know exactly where they're going to come in on the experience level and how much you're going to be paying them and all of that. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a little wiggle room there in terms of, it's not even necessarily that we're not employing as many people as we should, although that is sometimes what drives that surplus.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
got to be prepared for, oh, am I going to hire somebody with 20 years of experience, or am I going to hire somebody with 1 year of experience? And there's a pretty broad range in what the compensation is going to be in that case. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, no, it certainly is, because, you know, you're doing this budget 18 months in advance, and you don't know who's going to be here. And especially with the amount of turnover, that position that was like $75,000 can turn into like 40. And all of a sudden, that happens a couple of times, and you have a savings. Or like we did before, we couldn't hire people. you know? So there was a lot of open positions that didn't get filled that we had to supplement with contracted services.
Marie?
I wanted to go to one of the items that you said was a large driver of the budget, which is special ed. I was wondering what % of our school population is special ed?
About 20%. Marie, we have about 20% of our students.
20%.
Yeah, which is not extraordinarily high. I think the average is somewhere between 18 to 20%. And it can vary greatly in
Okay.
communities, but that's where we are.
Okay. I did find at one source, in 2023, we were at 17.8, so that's pretty,
Yes.
yeah. And I was wondering how many out-of-placement students do we have?
We've generally, over the last several years, averaged in the low 20s, 22, 23 students. You know, the great variability there, of course, is the intensity of the services that they need. Particularly those who are extraordinarily medically complicated can be up to $300,000, $350,000.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing we will always say in our budget presentations is we will never blame special education for the increasing cost of education, because it is ethically and morally our obligation. Not only the law, that's what we need to do.
I was wondering, of those out-of-district placements, how many of them are residential?
That I'll have to come back to you with, because
Okay.
we have that breakdown, I just don't
Yeah.
have it committed to memory.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Jen, may I just say that as part of our budget presentation, we'll talk about why the cost of educating students, not only in Merrimack but across the state, has increased, even though districts such as ours are experiencing declining enrollment. Because people often ask that, well, your enrollment is going down, your enrollment is declining by 100 students, why don't you have some budget cuts? Well, it all depends on the concentration of those students. If those 100 students are spread, across 12 grade levels, that oftentimes doesn't allow a school district to cut a staff member, eliminate a bus, but we'll talk to those things, because people always have questions about what's the impact of increasing enrollment, what's the impact on a budget of declining enrollment. Marie, talking about special education, I was at a meeting with South Central area superintendents on last Friday over at Pinkerton Academy. We were all bemoaning the fact that the commissioner, some of you may have heard, last week sent out, or a week and a half ago, sent out an announcement that the special education reimbursement will be declining. Now, our costs are not declining, but special education aid is declining. And the fact that, I think Matt has always told us over the last 10, 15 years, state aid to Merrimack, along with other communities, has remained very stagnant and has not increased in a commensurate manner that costs have.
All right, Bill, open the door for me right now, because this really bothers me. 24 years ago, Merrimack got $10 million in state aid for adequacy. 24 years later, have costs increased? Yes. Has everything increased? Yes. How much do we get now? $9.8 million. It makes you wonder what in the world is going on with the state of education in the state of New Hampshire. I was around when Claremont first hit, Andrew Valinsky. I remember sitting right next to him in the House chambers. Adequate education funding for schools, Claremont, Conval, Londonderry. How many lawsuits do we have to go through before, and I wish Chuck was here because he's really good at talking about this, before we finally get some sort of relief from what is a state obligation to take the burden off the local taxpayers. And therein lies the problem. I used another example the other night. I'm not going to get too excited now, Bill, so don't worry, okay? But if you had a kid that was taking driver's ed, you'd get $400 from the state, because the state thought that was a worthy program to teach kids how to drive to save lives. That went away probably 15 years ago, and now it's gone. You know, we had around 300 kids getting $400 to take driver ed, and now it's just gone. There's lots of little things that are chipped away at over the years as far as the state's obligation to the local LEAs, school districts. But the adequate education formula, I swear, they look at how much money they have, and they look at the formula, and they change the formula in order to back into the amount of money, and then if that doesn't work, then they say, okay, we're going to fund it at 68%. I mean, seriously? It's time to get a real good handle on this, because this is a problem in this state. I hate to see the burden. I pay taxes too in this state, believe me, and I have seen it go up astronomically. And a lot of it is just because the state doesn't contribute its fair share to offset what the burden is on the local taxpayers. And I'm surprised that wasn't like a topic during the last election, not to get political, because I don't do that stuff. But it's just amazing to me that 24 years ago, we were actually getting less now than we did back then. Makes no sense.
So I actually have a question. I don't know, do we have other questions tabling, or can I ask a quick one? Okay. My question, since we've moved into the revenue side of things, my question was really about what grants we received. Last year, I know when we were talking about the security system and some other things, you had said that there would be some grants that were applied for, and we didn't know yet the outcome. Could you share what grants may have been received throughout the course of the rest of the year? And then when you get to fiscal year to date for this season, I'd like to have the same information.
Yeah, last year, off the top of my head, I mean, the IDEA grant, around $984,000. There was a grant for Safe Schools for yeah, it was around, it was 300,000. I was going to say it was for locks and cameras. I can say that without getting too specific about where the cameras are, because they're all hidden all over the place. There's tons of them, but that was around $300,000. We got a Title I for around $138,000. We got recently the farm grant for $6,000, where Thornton's Ferry is growing some hydroponic whatever. So whoever is the liaison for Thornton's Ferry asked to see the stuff that they're growing hydroponically. I haven't seen it yet. You may find it very enjoyable. Yeah. So then there's a lot of title grants like Title II, Title IV, probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, we still get those, yes.
And are those not included in the 23-24 Revenue General Fund page because of timing?
They're an estimate, and we estimate like $1.5 million total.
Okay. And
so, but they're not in there as far as revenues go.
Oh, okay.
No.
Caitlin?
Thank you. So first, I was wondering about the line item 5 on there. Special ed. Sorry, I just wrote it down. It's line item 5. Page 1. Yes, just page 1. That I know that we have 17 of the para positions open, and that was under the support staff salaries. But do you know what other positions might be open that are outside of just the para? Because when I looked online, I didn't see like speech or OT or PT positions. I saw like an aide position posted, but I didn't see positions posted that would explain why we would have like that much of an increase in just the contracted services itself. I know that over the past few years, when we looked at the historical spending that you had sent us in 2018 to 2019 expended, it was 59,000, and then 2023 to 2024 expended, it was 1.2 million. So I just didn't know if the contracted, if that was because we have to use birch, not birch, is it birch? White birch, yes, because we have to use them and it costs more for those contracted services. When do we, because it's been brought up before at other meetings, when do we just take on, like, we already have an increase in our well, it says ESL, but ELL salaries, and I'm sure we would do well to have an increase in our speech, like the salaried members that we had, versus it just being contracted, because that is some of that money that we're paying towards just this agency versus having our own people that are with us. That was my first thing.
Caitlin, it's, we are always trying to fill those positions with in-house staff. It's just because, you know, so many school districts are so short of staffing that it's extraordinarily competitive. Here's where the issue of competitive wages and benefits comes into play. But it's, I will tell you, I've never seen anything like this since COVID. After COVID, it's like half of the labor force in this profession has disappeared. In some instances, we have been unable to fill positions other than contracting for them. And we would prefer not to do that because they earn a higher salary and we have to pay a higher amount. But we are obligated to provide those services, as you well know, to students. What we're hoping to do, which you'll see in the 2026 budget, we're hoping to take a couple of school psychologist positions that are presently contracted and advertise for them to be local employees. I take no shame in saying I have a Facebook page that is followed by a lot of people in Massachusetts where I worked for many years, and I will put kind of a ad on there from time to time saying, you know, if you're a retiree from Massachusetts and you're interested in working for a great school district, we'd love to employ you in Merrimack. Unfortunately, they haven't worked out, haven't been successful, but we look everywhere and anywhere to try and find well-qualified employees, because it's not our desire to have contractors provide them. They just don't have the same level of investment in our students and our organization.
Thank you. So my next question, where it was item 11, where it's texts, and we're over, and I know that's the Wit and Wisdom, and you said you used 238,000 from the reserve funds. How much did Wit and Wisdom cost total? Because I know that it was also under like some of the last year's, for like the budgets for different schools had it added to their line items. So I didn't know how much Wit and Wisdom was, like the whole entire thing.
Caitlin, and please don't hold me to this, we'll get you the exact figure at an upcoming meeting, or I can send it out to the whole committee. I'm thinking it was at like $400,000, if I remember correctly.
There was a certain amount that was left in the operating budget, plus the 238,000. So I don't know that off the top of my head, but we definitely can get that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Caitlin, could I ask a follow-up to that while we're on it?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Sounds
Is that a multi-year curriculum contract? Will we be paying for that again?
There
year
are
over
some
year?
replaceable materials that will involve some cost from year to year, like many other programs.
So those are like the disposable workbooks and things like that?
That's correct. Whatever is disposable in nature, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next. when you had listed some of the revenue, and I know you had spoken to the news about how the special ed differentiated aid would be reduced. Is that's just the one, the line, or not line, but, well, they all end in 00, that ends in 1200 that says state special ed differentiated aid, the one that was 595,000, or, okay, not the one that is the
No.
education grant?
No.
Okay.
No,
And not the adequate
five,
aid?
I don't even need to look at the paper. The 599 used to be called catastrophic aid. Now they call it differentiated aid. That's what's going to be reduced.
Okay, it's just that one that's reduced?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's, for next year, I decreased my estimated revenue considerably from that 595, because I don't want to leave it there,
To account for it.
collect 200 grand, and then be in the hole.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I think that's all I had.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anthony?
Thank you. So question, Matt. On the cover page of this general fund balance overview, it has the kind of, line items 1 through 16 listed and those summary, budget expended, blah, blah, blah. And then when I flip over into the back where it has the detail, there's so many more lines and these long numbers next to them, and I can't figure out, can you give me the decoder ring for how those line items 1 through 16 tick and tie to these? And in all seriousness, like, what's the decoder ring to help understand when some of these things are grouped into groups that we can cohesively roll up the way that you do?
Well, if you're looking at professional salaries, if you go to page 5 and you see the 81, okay, you've got your first 3 digits are your fund number. Your next 4 digits are your function number. The next 2 digits are your program code. The next 2 digits are your object code. The next 2 digits are your unit code.
I'm sorry, I only got as far as the second
I'm
set
sorry.
function. What was the third set?
Program,
Program. Okay.
like 41 is always special ed, right?
Okay. And
So
yep.
8111, that's your object code. And then the 00 is your unit code. And what I did basically is I rolled these up using the object code. So if you take a look at all the 8111s, let's see, how do I, professional salaries, that's administrators and teachers. So that would kind of roll up into that one total of 30 million. Support staff, I don't need to look at it, probably starts off with 8114 as far as object code.
Okay.
And there are a few
then-
other codes where I kind of combined,
Yep.
just because I didn't want to give you a list of like 100
Piece.
items.
So where can we find that, like, decoding account numbers for dummies? Like, how do we know, how do we do that?
Yeah, we can
It's
give
in the
you a
budget
chart of
books.
accounts explanation.
Okay, piece.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Sure, yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Yeah, I can tell you, what the function codes mean, what the object, what the program codes mean. I think art is like 01, 8610 is supplies, 8734 is furniture. I mean, it's all there.
awesome, thank you.
One of the things I was hoping to get when I requested some supplemental materials for the committee was a data dump of the budget by unit and then also by object. And so we didn't get that level of detail here, but that might be beneficial to go ahead and send to us for the next meeting. Because
Well, that's
it does
something,
have
if
those groupings.
if you're facile with Excel, you can sift and sort that, but I'll definitely sort it for you. That's easy enough.
I'm thinking more about the groupings. If I recall from last year's budget book, I believe it was
Oh,
by
you want me to
object,
subtotal?
where it would have all of the items, the line items that were part of the same object would be grouped together.
With a subtotal.
Yeah, I think it did have that.
It did.
I'm just thinking for someone who's never seen the budget before, it might be useful for them
Sure.
to kind of see
Yeah.
it in that context.
It's not a problem.
Any additional questions? Rachel?
Thanks. Matt, is the retained fund balance, the 350,000, is that your recommendation, or that is what you've set in stone at this point, and why that amount?
That's what we set in stone at this point. We did that when we set the tax rate. So it's actually, it's adding to the 500 before. So it's actually totally $850,000 that we retained.
Didn't you use-
500, I know it's confusing to me. It's 500,000 from last year, 350 from this year. I wanted to take the wit and wisdom out of the 500, but my auditors didn't want me to, so I had to leave the 500 there. So we increased that 500 by 350 to give us a total of 850, carried over into 24, 25.
Okay.
That
So
makes no
the-
sense to you, huh?
No, I'm just trying, so for the wit and wisdom, though, so you didn't actually pull that money from the surplus? You
I
pulled
did it first, then they gave me a
And then you had
reversing
to reverse
entry to
it.
take
Got
it
it.
out of there. And
Okay.
I'm like, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
It's supposed to come
Cut
out
your
of there.
expenditure.
So, but I had a crew that it was kind of a new crew.
Yeah.
So I want to get the older guys, somebody with gray hair to audit me next time to see if it's really true or not. But that's the way it worked out.
Okay. Thanks.
Gina?
Thank you for the overview. That was great. So I just want to also make sure I understand, and I believe I do, because it was a big topic. I'm not getting into the building, but the bonded debt, we will not have that expenditure next year because that was the last payment of that, correct? So just wanted
Correct.
everyone, to know that that is going away as well.
Any other questions on last year's budget expenditures? It's not the last time you'll ever be able to ask a question, but we are wrapping this up tonight. Marie?
Can I just ask, on the 2023-24, you cited 17 paras and 14 custodians short and 8 professional staff. I wonder, has that improved this year?
It's still difficult to fill positions.
Right, but what are the numbers?
I'll have to give you those
Okay.
numbers in one of our upcoming meetings. We
Okay.
have the aggregate numbers, but I'll give you a more detailed breakdown. Some of them
Okay.
certainly are in special education.
Okay.
That's an area, because it's more specialized in terms of teacher preparation, that most school districts are struggling.
Yeah.
More to come on this year's
Yes, may I
numbers.
just say, Jen, that for those of you who are new, whether you're looking at the chart of accounts or all of the numbers, I don't want you to get stressed. Whatever questions you have, we'll answer, okay? There's a method to the madness here. We have to follow the state's uniform accounting methodology in the chart of accounts that Matt says, fund, function, object code, program, location, et cetera. But take it a little bit at a time, and we'll work with you to make sure that you understand as much as possible.
Shannon?
So I have a question for you in regarding to special ed, and it's just mainly out of curiosity for me. So in special ed, obviously you have to have an undergraduate degree in K through 12, and then you get your graduate degree in like special ed. Are all case managers, do they all have their master's degrees? And I'm curious, I'll let you answer that one first.
As far as I know, all of our case managers have their master's degree. We often look, Shannon, for teachers who have dual certification, for example, at the elementary level. For years, we've been looking to hire those who are dually certified in both elementary and special education, because you can graduate with a dual certification, and they have a broader array of skills. but there are a certain level of qualifications for different positions, and we adhere to those as closely as possible. If we can't find them within our own employees, that's where sometimes we have to contract with an agency that does have someone who has higher level qualifications.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on last year's budget? Okay, we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is a quick overview of year-to-date. Matt, I would ask if you would just call out anything notable in the most direct way possible, because I do want to move through this quickly.
Yeah. As far as, looking at year-to-date, there's a lot of items in here that are paid up front, like the Honeywell, yeah, thank you. I just kind of had a little blank moment there, Bill. The HVAC contract that we have, it's around $460-something thousand. Takes care of everything like that. 24 hours, it's monitored. It's a really great deal that we have. Let's say we get, the property and liability insurance bill. There's nothing so far that's out of the ordinary on the year to date. I just did a run of it. Salaries seem to be in line so far. From the amount of time that we've had people employed. Utility bills, they always lag a couple of months behind anyway. I don't know why, but they always do. But so far, there's nothing glaring or nothing to be really kind of concerned about at this point in time. We're going to start, encumbering funds for the rest of the year to get a good estimate on how we think things are going to wind up. But with the volatility of kids coming in and teachers leaving and everything like that, and new folk coming in, it's kind of one of these things where you hope you budgeted enough, and usually we do. We always do, but everything seems to be tracking fairly normally as far as what I see and what I've witnessed in the past. The ones that are fully expended, I've fully anticipated them to be fully expended at this point in time.
Are there any questions about the year-to-date first quarter numbers? Rachel?
Sorry, this just caught my eye. Is the range to date just for the quarter, or is that for the year?
It was, I think it was the end of September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing, and Bill, for sharing your input, your perspectives, and being willing to transparently answer questions of the committee.
Yes, and for any questions that we did not have the exact answers, we'll make sure we have them at a follow-up meeting for you.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm just doing a quick time check. It's 9:09. I did have a agenda item, preparations for fiscal year 2025 budget. Here, I planned to change gears a little bit and talk about our plan as a committee, but I think we can table that and pick that up next month. I would like to move forward with sending out or handing out the liaison request forms, which is your opportunity as a committee member to indicate which liaison team you would like to be placed on. And you'll give us your preferences, 1, 2, 3, and we will do our best to match preferences and people accordingly. While that is being handed out, I also will let the committee know that you have an option to have a official SAU email address to conduct committee business. I personally went ahead and took advantage of that option just to keep communications separate from my personal email. It's a little bit easier for me to keep up with and stay organized that way. Be advised, though, any communications that are sent or received through an official SAU email are subject to right-to-know laws. So that may be a consideration for you as well. If you're interested in obtaining an SAU email address, please let me know, and Pat will assist us in getting those set up for you. I also want to remind the committee that in the event that you are unable to make a meeting, you do need to contact me via email to be excused from the meeting. We now have our option to call in, which is great. We thought we might use it tonight, but we did not. So looking forward to the day when we get to try that out. Our next meeting date will be December 10th at 7 p.m. And at this time, we think it will be at the Matthew Thornton room in the town hall because we've confirmed that it is available. All right, and I will send out an agenda for that meeting, but generally I'm thinking that we will regroup after the information that we've learned today and start to plan how we will evaluate the budget once it's the recommended budget is brought forth to us. We should receive our budget books at that December 10th meeting. It will be the week after the school board approves of the recommended budget, right? No?
No, that's just the week after it's presented
Oh,
to us.
that's
Our
tr-
schedule is, we've got a pretty aggressive schedule this year. We do have some snow dates in early January, but if there's no adverse events, we'll be done with our budget work by December 18th.
Okay. We'll have to align on that
But
because
that's only if there's no snow days, or what was it last year? There was a police event at the courthouse and we weren't allowed into the building, and things happened.
okay. All right. So a little bit more planning, I think, will have to go into the December 10th meeting because I was assuming we would have our budget books then. But if that's not the case, then we will. Oh, you won't have approved it. My language was approved. Yes. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
So
the budget books go to the board on the 2nd, right? And so give us a couple of days, because usually we scramble last minute to get these together. So we just take care of the board, give us like 2 days afterwards, right? We usually do that, Pat, right?
Last year, we actually brought them here,
We did.
We brought
So
them
you'll
here.
get them the same week.
and that
Okay.
was my hope that we would get them. Since we're going to be down there, we'll ask Mike to bring them down.
If it's your hope, we will do
Perfect.
what you please.
There you go.
we did. All right. So that's the plan for December 10th. I will open it up for public participation. Thank you for being patient.
You're very welcome. My name's Brian Halter. My opinions are my own.
Please state your address for the
10
record.
Everest Drive in Merrimack. So I was actually encouraged to hear, three of the committee members, speak up and comment on how they were new to this year. Because I think that last year, the budget committee got very much into the nitty-gritty of how the district is run, which is great, in understanding where the numbers come from. But they lost sight of the fact that there's an administration that's charged with putting on the best education that they can with the dollars that they have. That there's an administration that are experts in how to educate children. And there's an administration that brings a career worth of experience into how to do that. And it's really important as we look at how we educate our children to put on the best education we have to get the most value out of the budget that the taxpayers can put forward. And that's not by having the default budget pass. It's by actually putting out a budget that the taxpayers can get behind, that the taxpayers can see the value in. And what I saw a lot of last year was hundreds of hours of committee members, administration, taxpayers' time spent not advocating for a budget, but for tearing down the budget that was being proposed, and really, at the end of it, squabbling over less than 1% of the total budget, dragging two hardworking professionals through an emotional roller coaster for weeks on end, wondering whether they were going to have a job because of choices around were programs performing or not. At the end of the day, those were good cuts in my opinion. But those were cuts that the administration recommended because they're subject matter experts, because of their expertise. There are 20,000 jobs in town within 6 employers. There are 136,000 small businesses in New Hampshire that are going to be turning over to the next generation within the next 30 years. We need to build an educated workforce in town that can fill those opportunities. And if we don't maximize the value from our education budget, we're going to get passed by. We're going to see people coming into our town and snapping up those businesses. We're going to see people coming into our town and filling those jobs and distorting what we think of as Merrimack. And that may be good, that may be bad. We'll see. But my story was, I went to one of the top 2 or 3 public high schools in my state. Wasn't Westford, sorry. And I actually got my opportunity for my first office job because a senior engineer at Lucent Technologies went to my high school and put up a poster for part-time interns after school because he knew the quality of the STEM education that I was getting. And that gave me a pathway to go to UMass because it was better outcomes than going to RIT. It was cheaper than going to RIT. And that, again, gave me opportunities to be a software engineer, to eventually grow my career to being a managing director, running a $20 million budget within one of the country's largest banks, and also to start my own businesses. And so I've seen what that transition is like, where you have to take people and grow them and nurture them, and it's tough. So my ask of the committee is, as you're approaching the budget this year, bear in mind that the default budget is all the really expensive stuff, and it's almost the most expensive thing that we can do because it has the least value in it. When we talk about providing value to the children of Merrimack, we need to do better than that. We need to look at what are the programs that are performing and nurture them. We need to look at the programs that aren't performing and make tough choices about them. But those recommendations need to come from people like Bill Olson and the administration. We need to be comfortable with what they are. We need to understand why they are. But professionally, when I insert my judgment over my experts, usually I'm reminded about a month later that wasn't a great idea. If the committee is going to insert their judgment over the administration, the committee is going to own whatever outcome there is there. And that's not empowering for the administration. It's not empowering for the students. And it's not empowering for the town because it creates this whipsaw effect where people never know what they're going to get. So really, partner with the administration, work on advocating for the value that the budget has, because I think we can do some really great stuff. And we have an incredible industrial base where we can provide opportunities at any level of an organization, in any specialty of an organization, for those people to keep them living in New Hampshire, to keep them living in Merrimack, as opposed to spreading out across the country and leaving and going away and never being seen again. We have a ton of opportunity in town. Let's make the most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, committee comments. Are there any comments from the committee? Gina?
Thank you very much. I appreciate you staying so long to say that. I know his no way, shape, his opinions are his own. I appreciate what you're saying, and I think we were all frustrated last year. Emotions ran high for everyone, and I think it wasn't that we were trying to be nitpicky, but we were elected to represent the public. And when you have public showing up in droves in support of a teacher, in support of a program, then it is up to us as representatives of the elected body to take into consideration. And I think my biggest, what I was hung up on is that I understood that, you know, for example, like the French and Spanish program, it's two, you know, before I got to JMU's, I guess I didn't really understand, but it is truly just 2 weeks a year. But I think what a lot of us were hung up on, and maybe I shouldn't speak for people, is there wasn't a clear plan to transition into something else. For example, if we're getting rid of the gifted and talented, you know, what about those students? What was there a plan? And so for me, that was one of the, you know, the hang-ups that, I don't even want to say hang-ups, but, you know, the difficulties that I had in making, yes, reservations in making decisions, not because I wanted to make it difficult for anyone, you know, but because I really wanted, you know, we can't just take something away without proposing some sort of transition, you know, that doesn't work either. And I think it's not that we don't take into account your expertise, we do, but if, you know, what's the function of the budget committee if we're just going to take everything the school board and the administration says and not argue or not have concerns? So, you know, I completely appreciate that, and I know that other people have that feeling, but I just want people to understand that we are here because we are representing the public, and, you know, when the public shows up like that over certain issues, you know, and they feel strongly about it, we have to weigh that. And we, you know, the default budget, I don't know if anything, you know, whether the school board's budget that they laid out would have been passed either, quite frankly. Yeah.
There were a ton of towns over the whole state that ended up in default budgets last year. It was a pretty statewide thing.
Yeah.
So there's no crystal ball.
Yeah. But, I mean, thank you for sharing, you know, and it's something that I will keep in mind because I also got emotional too. But, you know, I think that's great advice, but we were elected to do a job and to recommend a budget, and it may not necessarily be, you know, I mean, because the school board's going to disagree with what some of the administrators say too and make different recommendations. You know, it doesn't mean that they're trying to disrespect their opinion at all, and we're certainly not trying to do that at all. So just want you to know that it's not a reflection of what we feel your expertise or your, you know, how valid your recommendations are. You know, my reservations, thank you for the word, were that I just wanted to see more transition in place, you know, to address the students who are so passionately, or, you know, people speaking passionately about, you know, what to do. It was a few, but it affected many. Just like special education, we talk about it's only 20%. That's a big 20%, you know. So just keep in mind. Thank you.
Any other committee comments?
guess if I could just say one thing, I just want to point out, like, I know it was a default budget, and like you said, many places did have that. We still cleared, over $3.6 million in surplus and are retaining an additional 350,000. Like, I think even with it being the default budget, we're in a pretty healthy spot here in terms of, resources for this last year.
Isn't that, the default budget is for the year that we are in currently. We don't know how this year is going to end up. That's the previous year's budget that you're looking at with that surplus.
Cheers, but could you remind us about how we're tracking? I thought it was about the same number. What, was it not, Matt?
I'm, as far as the budget that we're in right now, we're tracking fine. There's no aberration. But compared to 23, 24, it's a total different ballgame. We're talking 24, 25, and 24, 25 was the default budget. And we have to underexpend that budget, and we have to track properly because that's the law. So that's what we'll be doing, yeah.
But I think what Anthony might be saying, and
I'm sorry, yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like you're saying we have less funds available in the current year, and we are still,
No, we have more funds in the current year.
How are we trending this year in terms of where do you think the budget surplus will be for this year?
Oh, it's way too early for me, especially,
Okay.
to even ballpark that one.
Piece. Okay.
Lee?
First, thank you for that eloquent wrap-up, Gina, of our committee last year. I think we all struggled last year here. I think there was a lack of communication. I think there was a time hiccup with the issues that the school board had. It was just a disaster last year for this committee. I think we all left with a sense of having worked very hard and having gotten very little done. I thank you, sir, for your input. I really appreciate that. You're right, we argued over a very small portion of the budget last year. Bill, your team did an amazing job with what you were asked to do in the time frame that you did it in, trying to reduce the budget by about $1 million. And you made some hard decisions, and I applaud you guys for the effort that you made to come up with that, given kind of the late nature of it as well. I think we all respect what you did, and we may have disagreed on the board as to how to get there, and again, took in some public opinion, but as hard as it was last year, I think it was a great lesson for all of us.
Thank you, Lee. All right, any other committee comments? Okay, seeing nothing further, do I have a second?
A second.
Rachel? We adjourn at 9:29 p.m. Thank you, everyone.